back with author and podcaster Liz Wheeler, host of The Liz Wheeler Show. We're talking about the book Hide Your Children. Liz, you were talking about the Italian communist Gramsci and his view that you've got to target the civic institutions, and that's the way ultimately to get the working class and everybody else. It seems like, however, that there is another element that also came into the American Marxist movement, so to speak, and that is we're not going to get so much mileage out of the class issue. We'll get a lot more mileage out of the race issue and the gender issue and now the transgender issue. So it appears like the focus of American Marxism is now identity politics rather than class politics. Would you agree?
Yes, that's correct. And it's straight out of the Frankfurt School critical theory handbooks. I think a lot of parents recognized when their children were being told that if you're a white child, you're inherently racist because you're white. If you're a black child, you are oppressed because you're black. They recognized that that was bad and wrong, and they didn't want their children being taught that. But they didn't immediately recognize that what their children were being taught were the principles of critical race theory. The name is very important to recognize because critical race theory is the grandchild of critical theory, a neo-Marxist theory that was written by Max Horkheimer at the Frankfurt School. And it's exactly right. This Marxist dialectic of oppressor versus oppressed doesn't have to be applied just along economic lines, like the ruling class versus the working class. It can be applied to any group of people that can be divided by any immutable characteristic, as long as you can label one as marginalized and the other as being oppressors. So we see that along racial lines in the United States, where white people are told they're bad, black people are told they're being oppressed by white people. We see that with the trans ideology. Like critical race theory, this trans ideology that we hear children being taught that gender is not binary, it's not correlated to biological sex, that they can be a boy if they want to be a boy, they can be a girl if they identify as one. This is not just a random assortment of nonsense. It's the outgrowth of another neo-Marxist theory called queer theory. And what you have when you have critical race theory and then queer theory is you have critical race theory creating an identity crisis in children. They feel self-loathing because they're told they're evil and bad and there's nothing they can do about it. They start resenting their parents because their parents made them white or black. And it creates this identity crisis. Then you have the transgender ideology swoop in and say, actually, you can be redeemed. You can throw off your identity as an oppressor if you choose to put on a marginalized identity. The marginalized identity being transgender or non-binary or LGBTQIA. And in the process of these children, quote unquote, redeeming themselves by becoming marginalized, they not only reject who they are, they reject their families, and they are permanently secured as being Democrat activists, if not outright Marxist revolutionaries, because otherwise they are told by society that they are evil. It's not a coincidence that critical race theory and trans ideology appeared in our school systems almost simultaneously.
Liz, let's fast forward a little bit to how we get out of this, if we get out of it. You say that the Republican Party has sort of one approach, but you're advocating a different approach. What's the Republican generic approach and what's your approach?
Yeah, the Republican Party is supposed to serve as a bulwark against any kind of evil forces that threaten our liberty. And something has gone wrong, or else we wouldn't be existing in this cultural chaos that we are existing in. The Republican Party has failed in their fight. So I sought out to identify, well, what has gone wrong? What are we doing that isn't working? How can we change this? And I realized that it's both a philosophical problem that then manifests in a practical problem. The philosophical problem is you and I sitting here, we like to think of the United States as a free country, but what does that mean? What is freedom? What's the definition of liberty? Is liberty the ultimate end of a country, or is liberty the means to something greater? And the Republican Party has embraced the idea that freedom is the ultimate end. And if that's true, then what David French said when he said that Drag Queen Story Hour was a blessing of liberty, that would have to be true. These grown men dressed up as sexualized versions of women gyrating in front of children, there would have to be some kind of inherent morality in that just because they had the freedom to do it. But I reject that premise because that's Drag Queen Story Hour is grotesque, it's evil, which means that freedom can't be the ultimate end. It has to be the means to something greater. And I challenge conservatives in my book to grapple with this question. What is the something greater? What do we want our society to look like? What is human flourishing, and how do we use the just authority of government to achieve that? Because conservatives for a long time, Republicans too, have forgotten or misunderstood that limited government doesn't necessarily mean a government that is simply as small in size as possible. Limited government means it's constrained by enumerated powers and constrained by accountability to the people. But there is a just authority of government to make laws that acknowledge natural law, that acknowledge a pre-existing definition of right and wrong, and help order society towards that. If we pretend that there is no pre-existing definitions for any objective reality, then what results is what we're existing in today, where boys are told there can be girls, they can be girls if they want to, and men are told that, they can identify as a kindergartner if they want to, and white people are racist just by the nature of their skin color. Objective reality is simply obliterated.
I mean, Liz, you're making a really critical point here, I think, which is that even when I think back to Jefferson's phrase in the Declaration, the pursuit of happiness, there are some people who think that that phrase is sort of morally empty because everybody can pursue happiness however they want. So this comes back to your idea of freedom being the end. But I don't think that the American founders ever believed that freedom was the ultimate end because they had a clear idea of what the good life means. What does it mean to live out this American project, if you will? And I think for 2 centuries, Americans had a pretty good idea of what that freedom meant. It was freedom, ultimately, to flourish, to have upward mobility, to start a family, to live in a community, to engage with in civic engagement with your neighbors and your friends, to participate in local government. There was a substantive content to freedom, and the laws back that up. And I think what you're calling for is nothing more than a sort of revival of that. So guys, this is a book you really need to check out. It's Hide Your Children, Exposing the Marxists Behind the Attack on America's Kids. Liz Wheeler, a great pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much, Dinesh. I appreciate it.
During times of economic uncertainty and political upheaval, it's crucial to have a reliable source of financial guidance and insight. That's where Dr. Kirk Elliott, PhD, and his esteemed wealth management advisory firm come into play. Dr. Kirk Elliott has distinguished himself with 2 PhDs in economics and theology. He's built a reputation in expert financial solutions tailored to your unique needs. His firm specializes in wealth management, offering a comprehensive array of services to protect and grow your assets in an ever-changing world. In an environment filled with economic volatility, shifting political landscapes, finding a trusted partner during these challenges is essential. Dr. Elliott's firm employs cutting-edge strategies and an understanding of markets to guide you toward financial success. Go to KirkElliottPhD.com. That's Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's. KirkElliottPhD.com/Dinesh. Book an appointment and they will explain their process about investing. Again, that's KirkElliottPhD.com, or you can call or text 720-605-3900.